Welcome to today's webinar, Documented Management Systems for the 21st Century, sponsored by Omnex. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief for Quality Digest and your host for today's webinar. With the advent of the internet, cloud, and electronic workflows, what's the future of document management systems? Do we continue with a structure of quality manual processes, work instructions, and forms and checklists? How do you imagine the future of documented management systems given this context? This presentation today will highlight enterprise and site documentation and the need for each entity from site to department to individual to have their own documented management system structure. The documented management system should be a repository of things like organizational knowledge in the form of documentation and records and projects and audits and calibration data and interested party needs and expectations. But you might ask, how is this possible? That is just a part of what we're going to discuss today. Today's presenter is Chad Keimel. He is the U.S. expert on ISO 10013. That's the standard for guidelines for documented information for quality management systems that is currently undergoing a revision. He is also the CTO and founder of Omnex Incorporated, an international consulting and training organization headquartered here in the United States. Over the course of Chad's career, he has served as the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners, on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners, and has received numerous quality achievement awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year Award by the ASQ Automotive Division in 2005. He also developed and teaches auditor training for ISO 9001, IATF 16949, ISO 14001, and ISO 45001, as well as an integrated management systems lead auditor training course where all three standards are combined into a single audit. And also joining us today, we're happy to have Anthony John, who is the Vice President of Omnex Systems. And I believe, Chad, you are starting us off, right?
That's right, Dirk. Welcome, everyone, to this webinar, Documented Management Systems for the 21st Century. It's a whimsical title, and I have presented using the same title a few years ago. It gives me a chance to think about the future and to think about how documentation needs to evolve with the times. Let's quickly get to the subject. So I have a chance to tell you how, I thought about this webinar and what I wanted to present. So as you all know, I'm a part of Omnex, founded in 1985. We are a very global organization with offices worldwide. It is part of our DNA to provide various different service offerings in a number of different management system standards in terms of training, implementation, and services. We also do a considerable amount of work in terms of new product development and also auditing and assessments. All right. When you talk about the quality management system or management systems, it is a very vast subject. And I have presented so many different angles or viewpoints that you could talk about. And, it's so very important. When I talk about the subject of today's is really the third bullet on your screen, which is documentation availability, electronic workflows, and artificial intelligence. And how should documentation be available for our, the enterprise? I'm imagining, of course, a single plant, and I'm also imagining a corporation. Here at Omnex, we get a chance to work with a number of global organizations with, certain customer we are very close to has 300 different plants all over the world, a number of design centers, a number of sales offices, a number of warehouses. So how should we think about this documentation? How should it be available? And then the idea of workflows, and then also the idea of artificial intelligence. This is where we'll end the presentation from. But to get there first, we need to understand, processes and the documentation that goes with what we call a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And that structure is going to be there for a while in my thinking. And of course, we're going to have multiple different structures. I also want to talk to you about performance management, and I'll tell you why right off the bat in my first slide. Management systems and documented management systems are about providing performance and helping top management succeed with their objectives. I'll talk to you about net zero, and I'll talk about a current subject of mine. So these are all things I've written, presented, and talked about numerous times over the years. And I'll speak to you in a very abbreviated format today because it's not the main topic, but I can't talk about documentation without first covering these subjects. And we'll finish with what's happening, especially in the automotive space with new product development, or in aerospace with new product development, and what it is we're trying to do about that. Well, that was a lot here, and I didn't mean to spend so much time on it. So let's start with understanding the importance of business processes in management systems, how it needs to align with strategy, and the idea of enterprise processes and site processes, and finish with integration and standardization. Those of you who have heard me talk about this know, I've spent, I've done everything from workshops to 3-day classes to 5-day classes on this subject. Today, we'll try to talk about it in about 10 slides. And keep in mind that the reason we have documentation is to support the objectives of the organization based on the policies of the company. This is not just a viewpoint from me or Omnex. This is the definition of a management system in ISO 9000. That's important. And as Dirk mentioned to you, I'm the U.S. representative for TC 176 for ISO 10013. And of course, today, those of you who look at all the definitions, I don't want you to be, appalled by the terminology I use. I'm not going to use the terminology of documented information that's used. And we were very, very careful in defining things correctly for the standard, but I'm just going to talk to you in colloquial terms and have us understand, documentation. So the takeaway here is the whole idea of processes in this enterprise is to allow top management to succeed. And just to show this picture to say that we are in a very complex world where we have plants scattered all over. And I don't know if it's because a sizable amount of our work is in automotive and to some degree aerospace, medical devices, food, semiconductors, and high tech. And, we are part of a very, very global, including Omnex offices. And what are we trying to do? Processes need to connect us up so we can perform properly. So what do we say? We're going to talk about this idea of a process map without talking to you too much about that here. The idea of sequence and interaction that's required by ISO 9001 clause 4.4 that many of us do with the process map. And just to say, the process maps of the enterprise, the site, whether it's a sales site, a design center, or a manufacturing site or a warehouse, needs to be linked to the overall enterprise. And of course, you have enterprise processes and site processes. In this site process, I showed much more manufacturing, but of course, it could be based on whatever site it is. Because I'll not get a chance to talk about this in this very abbreviated presentation on this, the enterprise processes flow between the entities of the organization, and we like to say top management at the highest levels of the organization need to be the process owners of the enterprise. Moving on then to this idea of the site processes and enterprise processes, we'll talk about the high-level structure. By the way, this document is getting updated and changed. But this document laid out a mandate for all the management system standards, and yours truly, I'm actually on a couple of different technical committees in the US, which is the Environmental Management System, the Quality Management System, Health and Safety. I'm also with the IAQG on the AS9100. I can just say this, that with these rules in the Annex SL has led to a common structure in the management system standard. By the way, you didn't need this for integrated management systems. You know, if you've been following the many papers I have written, I started writing papers since about 2006. Our first implementation was actually 2002 in terms of integrated management system, and I wrote many papers starting 2006. And of course, we have done hundreds of integrations for integrating QMS, EMS, OSHAs. By the way, I have a book that I wrote in the American Society for Quality, which has 5 case studies of integrated management systems. Just to say, this high-level structure and the is encouraging us all to integrate our management systems. And this high-level structure should allow common processes to be implemented globally. Here is how I define the integrated management systems in the book, and also how Omnex defines it. An integrated management system is on 3 pillars of integrated processes, integrated risk, and integrated audits. And why are we doing this? Number one, it reduces the amount of work, it saves on maintenance of the management systems, and at the end of the day, it's all about savings. So, as I mentioned, this is a long discussion of, but this is the way many of my customers still are. They have standalone QMS, EMS, and OSHAs. You can see here, we tried to show that standalone, if you take the design center of plant 1, it has a QMS, EMS, and OSHA's documentation, which are not integrated, okay? And on the right-hand side, you're seeing the enterprise having one integrated management system. That's what we're trying to show here. And what we're trying to say is not only can you integrate these standards in one site, they need to be standardized globally with the same processes. In this presentation, we're not going to talk about how to get that done, but of course, that is what needs to happen, and it's not that difficult to do if you know what you're doing. And I just want to take away here, so I've been talking about QMS, EMS, and OHS integration since about 2006. Since about a year or 2 years now, though, we have said best-in-class integration integrates QMS, EMS, OSHAs, IT security, and social responsibility. And by the way, folks, last year, Omnex ourselves integrated our management system in this fashion. Not only can it be done for very large organizations, it can also be done with companies such as ourselves, which are global, but 700 people with 14 or 15 offices worldwide. And again, this is the fastest way to implement, and also it has reduced maintenance costs and registration costs. I'll just say one more thing. One of the goals we have when we implement best-in-class systems is to reduce the amount of documentation in the organization. There should be one quality manual with linked process maps with process owners. Processes should be company-wide, standardized, I'll say enterprise-wide, standardized, global. They can have local site processes. Work instructions are mostly manufacturing and shop floor. We have a methodology at Omnex that's called process review. For legacy parts, we go in and standardize them with process flow PFEMA control plans to standardize the work instructions. And of course, forms should be in hundreds, and they should be integrated and standardized globally. Of course, it may not happen all in 1 year, but over a couple of years, we can start with a handful of processes, and then we can slowly extend it overall. I always like to tell companies there's no need to be in a super hurry, because the goal should be excellence versus speed, or a combination of both. So just to tell you why I drew this is to tell you that in each level, the process map is getting decomposed. The process map at a very high level, at the enterprise level, is decomposed into process documentation, which is decomposed into work instructions. But of course, you know, work instructions are dominated by manufacturing work instructions for most of us. They're usually non-standardized even in a plant, and what we mean by that is we may have three different turning centers, and there may be three sets of work instructions and setup instructions, maintenance instructions for that same machine. And what we like to do is to do it by family of products and family of processes. And of course, integrated forms and checklists. All right, so many important ideas and thoughts. And why is this also important? It's because integration saves money. Standardization saves even more money. To learn more about if you have liked what I've talked about, here are some places you can go to get information, more information. I have an executive primer that I wrote in the book with the idea that we were going to provide it for free, because we are very interested for companies to adopt integrated management systems, because it's what's good for you, and it really saves you money. And also in terms of best-in-class integrated management systems, and I think I did one with you, Dirk, in Quality Digest, and that is also available for you from the Omnex Vimeo website. With that, let me give you a chance to write a few questions if you have. The idea of processes supporting the overall objectives of the organization, supporting policies. And of course, with the integrated management system, the objectives we're supporting is sales, growth, profitability, new product development launches, at the same time, quality objectives, environmental objectives, health and safety objectives, social responsibility, and so on. And I'll talk to you and I'll continue with that in the next section, giving you 1 or 2 minutes to write some questions. And hopefully you've had time. And I'm moving on, though, with more thoughts. And I told you, in different periods, now, I've been doing this for 33 years. I've had a lot of time to, I've had different interests, and one of the luxuries I get is I immerse myself in different aspects of different things. So I'm going to move forward, but I'm going to look back, and I wanted to tell you something. The very first implementation I did, I'll give you the company name because the company is no more. It's TRW today, but it used to be Kelsey Hayes. Kelsey Hayes, I think, had 20 or 26 some plants, and we were trying to implement one of the first versions of IATF 16949 called QS9000. I had this idea of global standardization even then, and we implemented that in 1995 and 1996 for Kelsey Hayes. And when you go to that tiered structure, this is what we didn't know, We created a common level 1 or quality manual, a common level 2, but the quality managers went and watered down, unbeknownst to me, watered down the level 2s and wrote all detailed level 3s, which is very different from the level 2s, completely beating the idea of standardization. So be careful of what we mean by integration and standardization. There are many pitfalls in the implementation. All right, with that, let's talk about performance management. And when we do performance management, we have to go and just talk a little bit about the standard, because at the end of the day, in this discussion, all of us are meeting multiple standards. This is 4.1, 4.2, 6.1 of the high-level structure. And why I want to say high-level structure is then automatically it's for QMS, EMS, OSHAs, IT, security, and social responsibility does not follow. ISO 26000 is a guidance standard, but we make it fit into this, maybe at some other state, we'll talk a little bit about why it's important. Well, I'll just say it now. In many of our organizations, we're doing social responsibility with a code of conduct, which is just a statement, which is then, there's no risk assessment and no integration back into the processes of the organization. So it's just a statement with no enforcement, no audits, okay? So that's why it's important to integrate that back into the management system. So in this discussion of 4.1, 4.2 going into 6.1, Omnex integrates that and implements that with this workflow and process. Our workflows in our software, this is in our methodology and process. I led a team working with Ford Motor Company in 1993, where we first wrote something called QoS for them, which is still a very important process for Ford and Ford suppliers globally. But since then, we have tweaked the process to include context, mission, vision, policies, interested party expectation, leading to goals and objectives with KPIs and processes. The takeaway here is not that you need to implement BOSS. You can, by the way. We have the methodology, we have the training, we have the implementation. We can implement something like this in 10 to 15 days. But the takeaway here is that results, which are the KPIs, is not one key process, by the way, key processes. Processes give you results. So the process measurables, the process KPIs for the key processes to drive a result are the key takeaway from this slide. The relationship of clause 4.4 with the sequence and interaction of the processes, which is the process map, and the process metrics we're monitoring, they drive the results. So you need to have the alignment, and everybody, no matter what methodology you're using, needs to use alignment charts, a tool we use for alignment. So this very important process helps you meet many elements of the high-level structure of all these 5 different standards that we recommend you integrate. This is another topic and another series of papers I wrote with Dr. Wayne Visser out of Oxford, who is one of the top 20 thought leaders in sustainability and social responsibility. The idea of going beyond 0 defects to what we call net zero, net positive, that looks at convergence of quality, environmental, sustainability, social responsibility, or as Wayne likes to call it, SQUELCH. I don't know how great an acronym that is, but Wayne seems to like that acronym. I know he's changed it just a little bit. He is actually is the chair in a university of what we call the integrated value chair. So it's a very important topic, and it's something we firmly believe in. And I don't get a chance to talk about it as much as I need to, but I wanted to put it in and let you know it's one of the key things for all of us. The third topic that I wanted to make sure you also saw is the idea of integrating APQP with first article PPAP into the new product development process, the idea of new product development phase gate, and of course, you may or may not know Omnex is very popular software that links DFMEA to DVPNR or test plans, special characteristics of KPCs, KCCs, populating the process flow, PFEMA, control plan, work instructions, right? And of course, today, as you know, this is our Omnex's process review process in the bottom. Today, again, as my interests change depending on where my customers are, we're working in the automotive space, integrating this with ASPICE, functional safety, and cybersecurity. Also, linking FEMA's, FEMIDA's, and fault tree analysis. All right, so we spend this time to sort of tell you, what our overall thoughts are in terms of documentation and document management systems and integration. Now that we have developed all this documentation, I want to spend the last half hour talking to you about documentation availability and electronic workflows. And again, the very same picture, and this is what I promised you in my write-up. We need to think about how these documents need to be available at enterprise level, at a certain site, and then a department. So when I do, things like I've been a lead auditor for a very long time. I ran a registrar for about 10, 12 years that we had founded, that we sold. And what I do know after visiting many companies is that many parts of the company will have their own website with all that documentation. That should not be. We should allow the enterprise documentation to be available to sites, then to departments, then to projects, and then for each individual. Each one of us should have their own views of the documentation. And also, all the workflow related information should be available in one repository for easy access. All right. So today's organizations are standardizing. This is where people are going. And I just want to make sure we explain this. We at Omnex have been working at this for now a while. And it's now become a large movement where we're going into workflows, digital workflows with process dashboards. And I would like to share some of that with you today. And when we say digital, what we mean is the data is entered into electronic forms, is being available digitally, so you can use it in multiple different ways. High-level process owners monitoring and review process measurables. Transactions are standardized and uniform and enforces the discipline, and a transparency of metrics between divisions, design centers, manufacturing site, and sales offices. Not to say we'll be there tomorrow, but to say there needs to be that thought, because the technology is available to get us there today. So again, before I'll take a pause here quickly, and then we'll try to show you some software. I just wanted to share with you, this is a part of a presentation I did a while ago, saying that there are 10 overall workflows from performance management to document management that meets the high-level structure. And with that as a premise, let's take a look very specifically, I'll come back to this AI, very specifically at software that allows documentation to be available. And let me also pause here to give you all a chance to write down more questions.
And actually, Chad, while people are doing that, maybe I'll go ahead and feed you a question here right now. Maybe you can address it, unless you're going to get to it in a bit, in which case just say so. But this question has to be: what needs to be done specifically for maintaining an integrated system documentation? And I believe he means in software, so software documentation, or electronic documentation, as opposed to paper documentation. Is there any particular thing that needs to be done differently?
So Dirk, I'll just say this. There's a big difference between electronic documentation and electronic workflow documentation. Number one, before you do electronic documentation, which can be done in Word, right, and software like that we're going to share with you today can take Word, PPTs, Excel, and you can create this documentation. The key is that you got to create it first in an integrated management system. If you're looking at integrated, I think the question said that. You have to create that using cross-functional teams and process owners and integrate in the Q, the E, the HS, and the social responsibility and the IT security. And I know it's a lot for people, so maybe we can start with 3, and then you can add 2 more later. And first create that, and then you can do it electronically, and you can put it into document management systems like Omnexus. But then the second part of that, Dirk, is to take these workflows and enforce it with an electronic workflow. I'm going to show one for auditing, working here with Anthony John. We'll show you electronic workflow. So you could have an audit management process in a Word document, but it's a second thing to have a global integrated management systems audit workflow that allows you to do Q audits, E audits, that's QMS, EMS, health and safety audits, housekeeping audits if you want, and IT security audits and so on. And maybe you didn't understand. The listeners didn't understand everything I said. But let me pause here and let me have Anthony take over, and we'll show you some software. Is that okay, Dirk?
Sounds good. Go for it.
Great. So what we're going to be presenting on the software is to be able to show the electronic workflow.
First, what we'll do, we'll just show you the document management systems. And first, I'd like to go ahead and sign on. We're signing on, and we're going to be looking at, you'll see immediately. So you see on the left-hand side, the entire set of documentation. In this company, they have a QMS and an EMS, and then that integrated into IMS. So one of the things we like to say, the document management system needs to be able to show documentation in multiple ways. They need to be able to show it integrated, or sometimes if a customer comes in and says, hey, I want to do a quality audit, show me a quality documentation, the same IMS documentation should be available in a QMS. In fact, let's go look at the IMS documentation. And you see the manual there. And you can just see, in fact, this is Omnex's own manual. Since you have opened it up, Anthony, let's just go look at the scope of the manual. So you can just see the kind of manual we have. Our manual is not the minimum manual. We put down our values. We put down, of course, our process map. The scope is very important. It's one of the minimum requirements in a, so ISO 9001 does not require a quality manual anymore, as you all know. But there are some other standards like AS 9100 and IATF 16949 that require it, or somebody like Omnex that does one because we think it's not a bad way to, as an apex document pointing to everything else. So here's, I mentioned to you that we have a scope of Q, E, HS, social responsibility, and 27001. let's go to the procedures. What I want to show you here, when you look at the procedures, you see the global, you can see if you go to the level name, you'll see there are some that are integrated called IMS, there are some that belongs to EMS, some that belong to QMS, right? You're seeing the entire set here. So when you go into the QMS documentation, as you can, Anthony, just go into the level 2 there. By the way, the software doesn't care. You can have 5 levels, 10 levels. Of course, we don't recommend that. You can see here, can you go to the QMS procedures? Okay. You can just see just the QMS documentation from the integrated management systems. And before I go to the departmental documentation, the same documentation, imagine this to be the entire repository, then I can pick and choose what I want different views to be for different people in the organization. So can you do the same documentation should be available for sites? Can you just show the sites there? So here, Mercury Manufacturing has a site in Germany and Thailand. As soon as I drop down Germany or Thailand, I can see the common documentation from corporate flowing into all the different sites in the world, and what are the corporate documentation versus what's there for each site. Okay, that's good. But also very important, as I told you before, many departments were creating their own micro websites because it's an ocean of documentation when you go into the overall enterprise. So here's a sales department, just wanted to have half a dozen processes for themselves, okay? And when the salesperson comes in, this is all they see. They see these 6 documents. So that's what we need to be able to do. I also would like to, maybe at a little bit later, finish up sharing the idea of the individual employee with the individual site, with the individual dashboards and individual documentation. Let's do that a little later. And Anthony, I think you wanted to show workflows, and I wanted you to show also a training sign-off, if you can, because we'd like to know if the people that are supposed to read these documents, if they've read it and they understand it. We'll show you how you can do that.
So one of the important things about electronic workflow is that you've been able to define the workflows and ensuring that the system drives these approvals and the workflows, right? So we have a comprehensive workflow that the users can configure with multiple rounds of approval, both sequential and parallel approvals. And then configurability of these approvals is where you could say, I have these 4 approvers, and I want 2 of them to approve these documents with, 1 being a mandatory approval. So the more configurable options you have in these workflows ensures that these documents are routed right, and it is also getting the right approvers. In large enterprises, what we've also observed implementing IMS is that times you may not be able to define the actual name of an individual, but probably by a title. So your approvals could also be driven by the titles within the organization.
So the workflow engine can not only be by people, it can also be by titles.
Correct.
So this idea of workflows we use again in projects, and we do it by titles, and then in the project charter, we define who's in that title. So we're not going to show that to you today, but in the project, you can identify all the input documents, or the APQP project, all the input documents, all the output documents, and we can configure the workflow ahead of time once so that it can be reused again and again with minimal, and to have that standardization of how new product development is supposed to take place globally.
Right. And clubbing the approval workflow is also notifications, right? So you'd like to want to get notified about any approval requirements, and then there has to be an action tracking system that notifies and reminds you about some of the approval actions that you need to take. All that needs to be, a part of an electronic workflow definition system. So document sign-ups is another important criteria. Now, we looked at the approvals, the electronic approvals were done, and the users have been notified about the change, and the distribution has already taken place. So how do you ensure that these documents are actually being viewed by these users? So as document controller and administrators, you should be able to click on a link and be able to see where the documents are approved and the state of approval. Okay, so here's a document here, and I could go into a user, view users, and see all the users who have read and understood the documents, and you can also see that when they actually have reviewed these documents.
And of course, you can, with one click, you can send it to everybody who has not viewed it.
Correct.
You can see the link at the very top, or you can send it to any individual person.
Right.
Just remind them to do that. And if in an audit you're trying to show did people see it, you can come back here and hopefully you won't have 4 missing. Okay, great. With that said, now my division, Anthony, this division has automotive. Why don't we show a different viewpoint when the automotive site signs on to this enterprise documentation? We know what they will see.
Sure. So Jane is going to log in. She's one of the automotive functional safety engineer, and she's responsible for automotive products. When she logs in, her view changes to the the set of documents that she has access to.
Let me just explain what we're seeing here. So in one folder, you see the IATF 16949, which is the automotive QMS. They also have something called functional safety, which is a product safety requirement for automotive. And we also see that she's involved in this ABS, new product development functional safety, which has been published here. Let's take a look at that. And so you can see the functional safety plan here. And then DIA stands for Distributed Interface Agreements. Jane is also she's being the SQE for the software for a customer, and also for the hardware. And so you can see all of that in one place. Okay. And maybe we can just open up the functional safety documentation just to sort of see what it looks like. Of course, it's all exactly what we want to put in there in terms of the documentation. Here, you're seeing the integrated manual, integrated work instructions, and you can see that the manual, of course, is the same manual that we showed you earlier, okay? But you'll see the integrated process documentation, but more interestingly, is the functional safety documentation that will also be there. Okay. With that, why don't we finish up this section before you talk about the audit workflow about personal,
Right.
Every person can define their own dashboards. For this one, we're going to sign off and come in as a specific.
So every, in electronic systems, where you have, you're managing projects or programs, or you're a document controller, each of you would have your own set of things that you do. I mean, I'm logging in as, a program manager, and, what is this day going to look like? What is Brad Smith's, day going to look like? He's able to see all the tasks that he needs to work right here, the projects and the programs that's working. Any upcoming meeting shows up here. His view of dashboard, what are his priorities? What is he looking at today? And any document approvals, and we talked about all these document electronic approvals, readily available for him at his fingertips to being able to make some quick and easy decisions and also complete some of those actions that are coming out of these electronic workflows.
Excellent. So maybe what we can do, to show the electronic workflow, are you going to go back to that original site?
To be able
Because
to...
I wanted to make one more point in all those folders, how the electronic workflow documents all come into one place, okay?
Absolutely.
And then you can show them the audit workflow, the difference between, and you can understand then the difference between a Word, Microsoft Word document, documenting audit process versus a workflow that standardizes the process globally.
Right. So we're signing in back in as the user, who had document control permissions, and we're going to look at him manage all these documents are all...
So let me just make that point.
Mm-hmm.
So this user is able to see, as earlier you saw, we have the QMS, the IMS, and the EMS. By changing the numbering, of course, you can change the order of the folders. You can also see the supplier QMS is included. We see all the APQP PPAP, or the new product development projects that this user is responsible for, all audit results, all customer concerns. Let's open up customer concerns. I'm particularly interested in knowing the high customer concerns. I just wanted to show you so how all the workflows will put all the documents in one place as a document repository. Let's open up the 8D, but I'll just tell you it has the 5Y, the 8D, the cause and effect diagram, right? And so you're seeing the 8D. I'll just mention this, Anthony. Wait, go ahead, show the 5Ys. I don't know if everybody uses the 5Ys. And of course, the way software should be, the workflow should be, is that this methodology is configurable to whatever methodology the customer uses. Meaning, if somebody doesn't use the 5Y, you can enable it off.
Correct.
Okay? So, I don't want to see 9 documents. I don't want to send 9 documents to my customer. I want to send one document. How would you do that, Anthony?
So the option available is that you could actually pick and choose the documents that you would like to share to your customer, and then you can turn them into a one large zip file with all these documents together and email them, or you can stitch them as one PDF file depending on how your customer would like it. So both options are something what will be very useful for them.
And either you can give them a password to come and look at your system.
Correct.
Or of course you can just email that to them.
That's right.
Okay, great. So you can see here continuing, you see the FEMAs and control plans, supplier PPAPs, and our PPAPs all coming, you can just close that so they can see clearly, all coming into one document repository. So this document repository are the records, or the work products of these electronic workflows. With that said, why don't we're almost towards the end, so why don't you take another 5 to 8 minutes and finish up. Maybe you won't show all of the workflow, but give them the idea of the workflow of audit management.
Sure. So the other workflow around electronic workflows audit, fairly complex, because when you're talking about audits, we're all faced with audit requirements, right, from customers, from your third party, internal audits, and so on. So all these audit management and the workflow of this needs to be controlled through a single window. Audit management with the this is an overall annual audit plan. We're showing it for a quality management system, but this could be fairly an integrated management system.
So how the integrated audit management system is you can put any kind of audits into the same audit or the calendar, and of course, based on whether you're part of this site or that site or this function or that function, it'll be sorted and you'll only see what you're supposed to see.
Sure. So each of these annual audits, so you actually have a plan when you are actually planning at the beginning of the year, and then you're tracking against the plan in terms of how you're completing them, and they're color coded to let you know if these workflows let you know that if you're actually meeting the timeline or not. And you could also go into more scheduling workflows where the details of the actual audit is being planned out with who's the audit team, who's your lead auditor, your auditors, and who are the auditee that you're going to actually meet in audit. So all that, including the process requirements and any other document requirements, are all can be planned into this audit. So once the scheduler completes the workflow, then it is transitioned to the auditor who's going to go in and actually conduct the audit. Okay. Again, having electronic workflow simplifies things where the notifications are emailed out, the forms are already available.
So you went in as a scheduler, and
Correct.
all the schedule is done. Now you're going in as the auditor.
That is correct.
Okay.
So now I'm as an auditor logging in to say, okay, again, the personalization could also be made for the auditor. You have different views of these
Just a
things.
few buttons like perform audit, upload documents, and so on.
Correct. And as an auditor, you'll be able to click on that link and see, okay, what is my audit today? I'm showing you a completed audit in the interest of time, but when you open the audit, you actually get to see what my audit schedule is, right? What am I auditing? Who are my associate audits for this? And all the forms and the checklist that I need for that audit is readily available for me. I can download them, or I would actually even use, even better, use online forms as I need to fill this information.
So very interesting here. You can see the previous cars from the previous audits.
Correct.
Right? Very important.
So as a user, I mean, as an auditor, if I have not, audited this location before, I could go back in time and look at history and say, okay, you know what, I want to look at overall history of this particular location that I've audited, and I look at all my historical non-conformances, and any of them that's not been closed out could also be factored into my audit plan. Okay. And the other part of it is that when you conduct the audits, you also need to have write up these non-conformances, and each of these non-conformances could be to a different auditee group, and they can actually go in and you can write up the non-conformance with clear standard requirements, what are the procedures, what is the non-conformance, and the objective evidences and screenshots.
So what you were trying to say, Anthony, is that when you submit this, the auditee that's responsible gets notified.
Correct.
They come in, they answer the part of the form that's their responsibility. The auditor gets notified, then the auditor either accepts it or rejects it.
Correct.
And then there's a workflow like that till everything gets closed.
That's correct.
Why don't we verbally talk about the rest, and then we'll, because of time.
Sure.
Okay.
And I want to just finish with one point here is that when you have integrated electronic workflows, it's not just, you have integrated management systems and you're also doing audits. And when you have these documents already in the system, you should be able to cross-refer procedures, not only the standard, but also the procedures internally used as part of writing up non-conformance. Again, to continue the workflow, as Chad was mentioning, the auditor should be able to submit this audit report to auditee going into looking at each of those non-conformances or OFIs, and improving and trying to respond to those through any problem-solving methodologies, and closing the non-conformance.
So we'll go back to the PPT. Folks, again, we were not trying to specifically show you any auditing software. What we're talking to you is about ideas. And the ideas that we have talked to you about is the idea of all the documentation in an organization being available at an enterprise level, at a site level. Remember, there are so many different sites, from a warehouse all the way to a design center to a manufacturing center who has different documentation needs. And then to a department which has yet different documentation needs, like the sales department we showed you. Then the idea of you see this picture of the Brad Smith in a project which we spent a lot of time. And this is really, I'm working with the Omnex team in really discussing how we can make the life of somebody in a project easier and easier, how they don't have to go away from this one screen to work. Anthony, I do want to go back one or two slides, and I want to talk about AI, if you don't mind. If you can go back. Okay. There you go. I wanted to just mention, this is where we are today. You know, you need to be, number one, the data needs to be digital. If it's digital, we can give you a number of different performance metrics for every transaction because the data is digital. Second is, because it's digital, we can use AI-enabled workflows. As you may or may not have seen, the Omnex bots can evaluate a DFMEA or can review a PPAP. Where is it going? We can use it to evaluate any of these workflows, including that audit workflow, right? So continuing along, you can see the project. You can see the idea of data and dashboards. So a very powerful, visualization engine is key to go with this document management system and supplier dashboard. And with that, let's summarize and conclude this presentation. And then typically we take about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A. So let me just say, here are some of the takeaways I want you to take away with you. Standardization and integration for what I'll say Q, E, HS, SR, and IT, security. I didn't mention this, but folks, today IT security is on the topic of your top management. The New York Exchange sent out a warning to your CEO telling them that the IT security needs to be on top of their, and that they need to report it as part of the reporting that they need to do for the corporation. That's how important it is to all of us. I won't say more, but believe you me, it is something we need to pay attention, and there are standards allowing us to, and high-level structures allowing us to integrate it into our organization. Next, social responsibility is very key. You're doing it with just a handbook without any teeth to it. So that's an important topic. Next, standardization and integration of process map, processes, forms, and checklists are also important. There are two levels of standardization you can do at work instruction level. One is through process review, and the other is through the project templates. Then let's go on. Processes are key to the overall important performance of the organization, and that there's a relationship between results and process performance. That was the key to the BOSS process. More important than the BOSS process is the alignment that you need to do inside the organization. And then the idea that documented management systems need to be available and customized for the enterprise, site, department, and each employee. And lastly, where we are today is electronic workflows, and these electronic workflows need to integrate into the document management system and be available in the same repository. And then, of course, artificial intelligence is the future, which is going to really change and reduce the cost of performing this work. With that, before we take on questions, just to tell you a little bit about a few of the books that I've written. Training and coaching coming from Omnex. These are some of the areas we do a lot of work in, industries we do a lot of work in, software that we have. And with that, why don't we take a few questions as time allows, Dirk?
Sure, no problem. Let's see. We've got about 3 questions here that are related directly to the software. So, does EWQIMS have a portal for entering production data and doing SPC, for example?
So the answer, the short answer is we have a module, a workflow called inspection control that's tied to the process flow FEMA control plan. The control plan turns into inspection sheets for receiving in-process and final inspection. And the data, of course, so what we say is that every piece of data can be turned into CP/CPK, not just few characteristics. As long as you enter the data in, and we have turned it into mobility devices to make it less expensive on the shop floor, or you can automate it and integrate that in wirelessly through the Internet of IoT into the inspection control. And that's the future in terms of getting shop floor data on a regular and controlled basis. Did you want to add something?
No,
to that?
I think that
Okay.
sums it up.
Okay.
So the next question, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, sure. Is this software compliant with the 21 CFR Part 11?
And of course, that's with medical devices. And
Right.
I'll let Anthony answer.
The answer is yes. We comply to for our medical devices standard. So one of the requirement is that there has to be an additional password requirement. It cannot be the same as your login password, and has to be authenticated as part of the digital signature. I don't know if there's a question also related to the integration of it. So if you already are using Microsoft Active Directories within your enterprise, your logins could be tied into your enterprise to Microsoft Active Directories, and then you can actually have one additional authentication that is to comply to that standard.
Okay.
Short answer, Dirk, is yes.
Yes. All right. Let me see if I understand this one. So, about procedures that document interdepartmental processes. How do you manage them in your platform in order for them to be available to the pertinent individuals? And I think I understand what they're saying there is, can these be tailored so the right individual in any particular department sees what they need to see? That's how I'm interpreting that question.
So you can organize, the software doesn't stop you from organizing data any which way you want. But typically, we call them processes. Processes cut through departments or functions. So when you document these processes, right now we won't talk electronic workflows. We'll just say it's a MS Word. We have 10 or 15 or 30 processes documented, interdepartmental documented processes. And of course, it will be available, as easy as an intranet, which is inside the company, or internet, where you can see it from inside the company or outside the company, or it could be on a cloud. Anything else you want to add to that? The short answer is the data can be available for you to view on your mobile device or on your computer.
Right.
Okay. Early on, Chad, you mentioned documentation and processes and procedures across multiple sites. When this comes down to sites in different countries, is there any particular issues that need to be addressed? Do templates have to change? Obviously, I'm assuming there's some sort of language module for translating, processes, procedures to different languages. Can you just address that a little bit about multi-site international organization?
As we speak, we have companies using it in Chinese, Spanish, Thai. What are some of the more exotic ones? Japanese.
Polish.
So the way we designed this, so right now, if you sign on as a Polish user, because of the country, we know where who you are, and the site, we know who you are, all the menus and everything changes into Polish. Okay?
Okay.
And that's the same with every other location. And let's say it's a language we don't have. What we can, we can get that done very easily because of the way we designed it when we envisioned it in the first place. So
Okay.
I hope that explained
Yeah,
how we
and
do
so
it.
so if you have a site in Poland, but then you also have a site in France, when they run the software, they're going to see everything in French, right? I mean, it's per site where the language translation or however you want to put it is at. Is that correct?
That's right. But I could be visiting the U.S., but my language is, French. When I sign out in the U.S., I'll only see it in French.
Oh, okay. So it's
But
based.
you can just
Okay.
change the language if you want.
So
Okay.
it's a preference of what you want, how you want the language.
Interesting.
What's the
Okay.
language?
Okay, cool. Let's see. That is, I think that is it for our time today and for the questions. If we didn't get to your questions, I think there is one or two left here. I will forward those on to the folks at Omnex, and somebody there from Omnex, Chad or Miles or Anthony or somebody will get back to you to answer your question if we didn't get to it. So Chad and Anthony, thanks for the presentation today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be doing future webinars, both at Omnex and through Quality Digest. We'd like to invite you to join that, offer any Omnex training or any support we can offer you. Thank you all. Bye-bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
See you
Thank you,
guys.
Dirk.
Sure. Omnex, just a little follow-up here. Omnex will contact you about, several of you asked about a PDF of the slides and a recording of the webinar. Omnex will be getting back to you probably within a few days with information on how to obtain those slides and a link to the recording. So from all of us here at Quality Digest and at Omnex, have a great day, and we will see you at the next webinar. So long.
Thank you.